The ornate ballroom of the Hong Kong Grand Hotel shimmered with crystalline chandeliers and silk-draped tables on the evening of March 12, 1967. The air carried the mingled scent of jasmine tea, expensive cologne, and freshly polished mahogany. Over 300 guests in tailored suits and elegant xiangsams filled the space. Business magnates, film executives, martial arts masters, political figures, all gathered to honor the legendary IP man, Grandmaster of Wing Chun, on his 70th birthday. Among them stood Bruce Lee, 26 years old, exactly 5 feet 7 inches tall, 135 pounds of coiled precision. He wore a simple black suit, modest compared to the opulent attire surrounding him, but carried himself with quiet dignity. His dark eyes moved constantly, observing, calculating, never at rest. He had flown from Los Angeles specifically for this night, leaving behind his growing Hollywood career because IP Man had been more than a teacher. He had been the compass that pointed Bruce toward his true path when he was a directionless teenager prone to street fights and trouble. Bruce stood near the entrance, watching his 70-year-old Sifu move slowly through the crowd. IP Man's body had grown frail with lung cancer. His breathing labored, but his eyes remained sharp, his presence commanding. Every few steps, someone approached to bow, to offer respect, to acknowledge the decades he'd spent refining and preserving an art form that could have died with the previous generation. The ballroom's golden light caught on jade cufflinks and pearl necklaces. Conversations hummed in Cantonese, Mandarin, and English. Waiters in white gloves navigated between bodies carrying trays of dim sum and champagne. Outside, through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Victoria Harbor glittered with reflected lights from passing boats. Bruce had not seen his teacher in 3 years. The weight of that absence pressed against his chest as he watched Ip Man pause to catch his breath, one weathered hand gripping the back of a chair. Time was running out. Everyone in this room knew it, though no one spoke it aloud. A commotion near the main entrance shifted Bruce's attention. A man in his early 40s entered, shoulders broad, chest puffed with self-importance. He wore a midnight blue suit cut from expensive Italian fabric, a gold Rolex catching light on his wrist. His name was Chen Wei Dong, though most knew him as Master Chen, a title he insisted upon despite never having completed formal training under any legitimate lineage. He ran 3 commercial kung fu schools across Kowloon, teaching watered-down techniques to wealthy expatriate families willing to pay premium prices for the exotic mystique of martial arts. Chen had built his reputation on aggressive marketing and louder claims of mastery than any genuine practitioner would make. He had publicly criticized IP Man's teaching methods multiple times in newspaper interviews. Calling them outdated, impractical, and too secretive, he claimed Wing Chun needed to be modernized and made accessible, code words for commercialized and diluted. Bruce's jaw tightened as Chen strode through the crowd. Several guests stepped aside, conversations faltering. Some nodded respectfully out of social obligation. Others simply stared. But Chen stopped at the entrance of the main ballroom. A doorman stood there, elderly, perhaps 65, wearing the hotel's standard burgundy uniform with brass buttons. His name tag read Lao. He had been stationed at this position for the evening's duration, politely greeting arriving guests, checking names against the invitation list. His face carried the weathered patience of someone who had worked service positions his entire life. Chen approached without breaking stride, clearly expecting the doorman to move aside automatically. Lao lifted one hand gently, voice quiet but clear in Cantonese. "Excuse me, sir, may I see your invitation?" Chen stopped. His expression shifted, surprise first, then indignation. He looked down at the doorman, who stood several inches shorter, then spoke with deliberate condescension. "Do you know who I am?" The words carried across the nearby space. Several conversations stopped, heads turned. Lao maintained his gentle composure, hands still extended, politely. "I apologize, sir, but I need to verify all guests. It's hotel policy for private events." Chen's face darkened. He leaned forward slightly, voice rising just enough to ensure nearby guests could hear. "I am Master Chen Weidong. I run 3 successful kung fu schools. I have trained over 500 students. I was invited personally by the event organizers." He paused, then added with naked disdain, "Unlike you, I actually matter in the martial arts community." The insult landed like a physical blow. Lao's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Old pain, perhaps, or resignation. He lowered his hand slowly. "Of course, sir. Please, go ahead." But Chen didn't move immediately. He seemed to enjoy the moment, standing over the smaller man, making him feel his insignificance. He adjusted his gold watch deliberately. taking his time. Next time, recognize people of importance before wasting their time. Lao nodded once, eyes downcast. Chen finally stepped past him into the ballroom, already turning to greet a nearby film producer with booming confidence, the doorman instantly forgotten. But Bruce Lee had seen everything. He stood 30 feet away, near a pillar draped with red silk. His body had gone absolutely still, the kind of stillness that precedes violent movement, the calm before thunder. His hands, which had been relaxed at his sides, slowly curled into fists, not the tense fists of someone preparing to fight, but the controlled fists of someone choosing not to, because Bruce knew something Chen Weidong didn't. The doorman Chen had just humiliated, the insignificant elderly man in the burgundy uniform, was Lao Bun, one of IP Man's earliest disciples. He had studied Wing Chun for over 40 years. He had trained alongside IP Man in Foshan before the Japanese invasion, before the Communist Revolution, before Hong Kong became their refuge. He had fought in actual life-or-death encounters during wartime, defending villages, protecting families. Lao Bun had stopped teaching publicly years ago. He took the doorman position to support his family after his kung fu school closed. Not from lack of skill, but because he refused to commercialize his art, refused to accept students who wanted quick mastery without understanding discipline, refused to advertise or make grand claims. He embodied everything genuine in martial arts that Chen Weidong perverted. And Chen had just spit on that legacy. Bruce's breathing slowed deliberately. His mind moved through options with the speed of trained instinct. He could confront Chen verbally, expose his ignorance, humiliate him in return. The satisfying path. The ego-feeding path. But that would make a scene at his teacher's birthday celebration. It would shift focus from honoring IP Man to defending wounded pride. It would reduce the evening to the level Chen operated on. Loud, performative, self-serving. Noel. Desai's. Bruce moved through the crowd with fluid purpose, not hurried but absolutely direct. Guests parted naturally without consciously registering his movement. He reached the entrance where Lao Bun still stood. Face neutral, hands clasped behind his back, pretending the previous moment hadn't carved fresh wounds into old scars. Bruce stopped directly in front of him. Lao's eyes lifted, recognition sparking immediately. He had known Bruce as a teenager, the rebellious, talented student who left Hong Kong for America and somehow made their art visible to the Western world. Bruce bowed deeply. Not a casual nod of greeting, but a full formal bow from the waist. The kind reserved for elders, for masters, for those who have earned respect through decades of dedication rather than years of self-promotion. He held the position for 3 full seconds. The conversations near the entrance died completely. When Bruce straightened, his voice carried absolute clarity, speaking in Cantonese loud enough for surrounding guests to hear. Sifu Lao, it is an honor to see you here tonight. The title, Sifu, teacher, was deliberate, unmistakable. It established hierarchy for everyone within earshot. Lao's eyes widened slightly. His mouth opened, then closed. His hands unclasped, moving uncertainly before settling at his sides. Bruce, you don't need to... Bruce interrupted gently but firmly. I need to thank you properly. When I was 17, angry and undisciplined, you took time during a Saturday training session to show me the difference between fighting and martial arts. You told me that anyone can throw punches. Real mastery is knowing when not to. His voice grew quieter, more intense, forcing nearby listeners to strain slightly to hear. That lesson changed my life. It's why I could go to America and represent our lineage with dignity instead of ego. It's why I remember that every technique we learn is a gift from those who preserved it before us. Lao's eyes glistened. His weathered face worked through emotions, surprise, gratitude, something deeper that might have been recognition that someone remembered that his years mattered, that he hadn't been forgotten by the art he loved. Bruce wasn't finished. He reached into his jacket's inner pocket and withdrew a small wrapped package. Rectangular, about the size of a book. He had brought it from Los Angeles specifically for this moment, though he hadn't known until 2 minutes ago exactly when. It would be given. He extended it with both hands, the traditional sign of respect. This is a first edition of my training manual, published last month in America. I wrote your name in the acknowledgments section. You're listed among the masters who shaped my understanding of what it means to be a martial artist. Lao took the package with trembling hands. He looked down at it, then back at Bruce, then down again. His lips moved soundlessly for a moment before words formed. Bruce, I'm just a doorman now. I haven't taught in years. I don't deserve... You deserve more recognition than you've received. Bruce's tone shifted, becoming steel wrapped in silk. His next words were still directed at Lao, but intended for everyone listening, including Chen Weidong, who had stopped his conversation with the film producer and turned, sensing the sudden attention shift in the room. Wheel masters don't need to announce themselves. They don't need gold watches or newspaper interviews. They carry their art in their character, in their humility, in their understanding that true strength is demonstrated through grace, not arrogance. The silence in the immediate area became total. Bruce maintained eye contact with Lau, but his voice projected further. Some people measure success by how many students they collect, how much money they charge, how loudly they can claim mastery. But I was taught that we measure success by whether we honor the art, whether we preserve its integrity, whether we remember where it came from. He paused, letting the words settle like sediment in water. Anyone can open a school and call themselves a master. It takes actual courage to remain true to principles even when no one's watching, even when it means working a humble job to survive, even when others have forgotten your name. Chen Weidong's face had turned the color of brick. His jaw muscles worked visibly. Several guests glanced between Bruce and Chen, understanding dawning across their expressions. The parallel was too obvious to miss. The humble doorman honored, the loud self-promoter implicitly criticized, all without a single direct accusation. Bruce finally broke eye contact with Lau and turned to face Chen directly. Their eyes met across 20 feet of polished floor. Bruce didn't speak, didn't gesture, didn't make any theatrical display. He simply looked at Chen with absolute calm, his expression carrying a question that didn't need vocalization. What kind of man insults someone without knowing who they are? What kind of martial artist leads with ego instead of respect? The moment lasted exactly 5 seconds. Chen's face cycled through emotions: anger, defensive pride, then something that might have been uncertainty as he registered the surrounding crowd's shifted attention. The whispered conversation starting at the room's edges. The way people were looking at him differently now. Someone near Chen whispered to their companion, not quite quietly enough. "That's Lao Bunny studied under IP Man in Foshan, one of the originals." Chen's expression cracked slightly. Bruce turned back to Lao, effectively dismissing Chen from relevance. His voice returned to warmth. "Would you honor me by sitting at our table tonight? My wife Linda is here. She would love to meet you. We can share stories about the old training hall." Lau looked uncertain, glancing at his doorman post, at the hotel manager across the room, at the uniform he wore. Bruce smiled gently. "I already spoke to the manager earlier. He knows you're a guest tonight, not staff. Please." Lau's resistance dissolved. He nodded once, slowly, then with more conviction. He carefully removed his burgundy jacket, folding it over his arm, revealing a simple white shirt beneath. Without the uniform, he transformed, still elderly, still weathered, but no longer diminished. He stood. Bruce placed one hand lightly on Lau's shoulder, guiding him into the ballroom. They walked past Chen Weidong. Bruce didn't look at him, didn't acknowledge his presence. Complete indifference was more devastating than any confrontation could have been. Chen stood frozen, his expensive suit suddenly feeling too tight, his gold watch too ostentatious, his entire carefully constructed image of importance crumbling under the weight of a simple truth. He had revealed himself. His character was now visible to everyone who mattered in this community, not through what Bruce had said about him directly, but through the contrast. Who Bruce chose to honor versus who Chen chose to diminish. As they passed, Bruce heard Chen's breathing quicken, heard the rustle of his suit as his hands clenched at his sides. The ballroom seemed to part naturally as Bruce and Lau moved through it. IP Man, sitting at the head table, looked up. His tired eyes sharpened as he recognized Lau, saw the package in his former student's hands. Understood immediately what had occurred. The old master's lips curved into the faintest smile. Bruce guided Lau to their table near IP Man's. Linda Lee stood immediately, extending her hand with genuine warmth. She had heard Bruce speak of the old masters who shaped him, who taught lessons beyond technique. As they settled into seats, the ballroom's conversations resumed, but the energy had shifted. People approached Lau to greet him, to acknowledge him, to remember publicly what they had perhaps forgotten privately. This man had preserved and practiced their art when it would have earned him nothing but personal satisfaction. Chen Weidong remained near the entrance, no longer moving through the room with confident swagger. He stood isolated despite the crowd, his importance revealed as self-proclaimed rather than earned. He had two choices now. He could leave, nursing his wounded pride, blaming Bruce for embarrassing him, learning nothing from the moment, or he could recognize what had just been demonstrated, that real power isn't about dominating others, but about lifting them up. That true mastery shows itself through who you choose to honor, not who you choose to diminish. The answer came 15 minutes later. Chen approached Lao's table slowly, hesitantly, his earlier swagger completely absent. He stopped several feet away, hands clasped in front of him, head slightly bowed. His voice, when he spoke, carried none of its previous arrogance. Mr. Lao, I need to apologize. Lao looked up from his conversation with Linda, surprised. Chen's words came with difficulty, each one costing him something. I didn't know who you were. But that's not actually the point, is it? I shouldn't have spoken to you that way regardless of who you were. I was rude. I was disrespectful. I acted like my importance mattered more than basic human dignity. He swallowed hard, his expensive watch suddenly seeming like a child's toy worn to feel grown up. I've spent years building schools, collecting students, trying to be seen as a master. But tonight I realize I've been chasing reputation instead of earning respect. I've been teaching without understanding the first principle, humility. His voice cracked slightly. I don't know if you can forgive me. I don't know if I deserve forgiveness, but I needed to say I'm sorry. The surrounding tables had gone quiet again, but differently this time, not with judgment, but with witnessed vulnerability. Lao studied Chen for a long moment. His weathered face showed the calculations of someone deciding between justice and mercy, between what Chen deserved and what might actually transform him. Finally, he gestured to an empty chair at their table. Sit down. Chen's eyes widened. Praise, are you sure? Sit. Chen sat, moving like someone in unfamiliar territory. Someone whose confident mask had been removed and wasn't sure what face to wear underneath. La leaned forward, voice quiet enough that only their immediate table could hear. I'm gonna tell you something. My Sifu IP man told me when I was young and full of myself, thinking I knew everything because I could defeat people in challenge matches. He paused, letting anticipation build. He said, Lao, breaking someone is easy. Any fool with strength can destroy. But building someone back up, that takes mastery, that takes control, that takes understanding that your real opponent is never the person in front of you. It's always the weakness inside yourself. Chen's hands gripped his knees, knuckles white. Lao continued, you came here tonight seeking recognition, wanting to be seen among the important people. But you missed the most important recognition, seeing the value in everyone you meet, regardless of their title or position. That doorman you dismissed? He was me. But more than that, he was a test. Life puts those tests in front of us constantly. How we respond reveals who we actually are beneath our accomplishments. He reached across the table and placed one weathered hand on Chen's arm. You failed that test tonight, but you passed a harder one by coming here to apologize. That took more courage than any fight. That showed me you might actually be teachable. Chen's eyes glistened. His voice emerged barely above a whisper. What do I do now? Bruce, who had been listening silently, spoke for the first time since Chen approached. You go back to your schools tomorrow and remember this feeling, this humility, this understanding that you still have everything to learn. You teach your students that martial arts isn't about dominating others. It's about mastering yourself. You stop claiming titles you haven't earned. You stop commercializing an art that deserves reverence. His tone wasn't harsh, but it was absolute. And maybe in 10 or 20 years, if you actually dedicate yourself to the art instead of your reputation, someone will call you master because of who you've become, not because you demanded they do it. Chen nodded slowly, absorbing each word like medicine that tasted bitter but promised healing. I understand, thank you both of you. He stood, bowed deeply to Lao, then to Bruce, then moved back into the crowd, not with his earlier swagger, but with something that might eventually grow into genuine humility. The evening continued. IP Man approached their table shortly after, moving slowly but deliberately. He placed one thin hand on Lao's shoulder, squeezed gently, said nothing. Some acknowledgments transcend words. Then he turned to Bruce, eyes carrying something between pride and sadness. The look of a teacher who recognizes his student has fully integrated the lesson and no longer needs guidance. You handled that well, not with your fists, with your character. Bruce stood, embraced his teacher carefully, conscious of the old man's fragility. You taught me that character is the only technique that matters in the end. IP Man smiled. I taught you the forms. You discovered the meaning yourself. They spoke briefly about Los Angeles, about Bruce's film work, about the challenges of representing Chinese martial arts in America without reducing them to exotic spectacles. Then IP Man returned to his seat, his breathing labored, his energy depleted. He would die 16 months later, his legacy secured not just through technique, but through students who understood that martial arts was ultimately about humanity, about how we treat others, how we handle power, how we choose to respond when we can easily destroy. That night at the Hong Kong Grand Hotel became a story told across the martial arts community, not as dramatic legend with embellished details, but as quiet testimony to a simple truth. Bruce Lee, who could have humiliated Chen Weidong publicly, who could have demonstrated his superior skill through verbal or physical domination, who could have destroyed the man's reputation with a few cutting words, chose instead to honor someone who deserved recognition. That choice, executed in 5 seconds, revealed more about Bruce's mastery than any fight could have demonstrated. It showed that real strength is choosing restraint when destruction is easy. It showed that real power is lifting others up rather than pushing them down. It showed that real mastery is recognizing the humanity in everyone, the forgotten doorman, the insecure self-promoter, the dying teacher, the struggling student, and responding with dignity rather than ego. Chen Weidong's schools continued operating, but transformed gradually. He stopped advertising himself as master, removed the title from his promotional materials, began studying seriously under legitimate teachers who agreed to take him on as a beginner despite his age. His students noticed the change. Less bravado, more substance. Some left wanting the theatrical promises of quick mastery, others stayed, respecting the difficult path of actual growth. 20 years later, Chen would write in his own training manual, published with modest claims and genuine humility, "I once thought martial arts was about being better than others. I measured success through comparison, through domination, through reputation. Then I met two masters at a birthday celebration who taught me something I had missed despite years of training. Martial arts is about being better than your previous self. It's about recognizing that your real opponent is always your ego, your pride, your need to feel superior. The moment you win that fight, the moment you can stand beside someone you once looked down on and see them as equal in dignity despite different circumstances, that's when you actually begin to understand what mastery means." Lao Bun never returned to commercial teaching, but he began offering private lessons in a small studio above a tea shop. He taught perhaps 5 students at a time, carefully selected, refusing payment from those who couldn't afford it. He taught until his death at 83, preserving techniques and principles he had learned 6 decades earlier. At his funeral, Bruce Lee flew from Los Angeles specifically to speak about the doorman who had taught him about dignity, to ensure the old master was remembered properly. And Bruce himself carried that evening's lesson through his entire career. The understanding that you can win every fight and still lose yourself. That you can defeat every challenger and still fail the most important test. Whether you use your power to build or destroy, to honor or diminish, to teach or dominate. He faced racism in Hollywood, dismissal from executives who couldn't imagine an Asian leading man, critics who called his philosophy simplistic or derivative. He could have responded with bitterness, with anger, with the sharp edge of his capable fists or his sharper tongue. Instead, he honored those who came before him, who preserved the art when it earned them nothing, who taught him that strength without character is just violence wearing a different costume. Now ask yourself something uncomfortable. Who in your life have you dismissed because they didn't match your definition of important? What doorman have you walked past without seeing their full humanity? What elderly person have you underestimated because their pride is behind them? What humble worker have you overlooked because their title didn't demand your attention? And more critically, when you win an argument, prove someone wrong, catch someone in a mistake, what do you do with that power? Do you humiliate them? Do you press your advantage? Do you make them feel small to make yourself feel large? Or do you recognize that moment as a test of your character, an opportunity to demonstrate the kind of mastery that doesn't require an audience, that doesn't need validation, that simply chooses dignity because it's the harder path? Because here's the truth that makes this story uncomfortable. Most of us are more like Chen Weidong than Bruce Lee. We dismiss people without knowing their stories. We seek recognition instead of earning respect. We use whatever small power we possess to feel important rather than to lift others up. But we also have the capacity Chen showed in his apology, the ability to recognize when we failed, to acknowledge our ego, to choose growth over pride. The question is whether we'll wait for someone to publicly reveal our character before we examine it ourselves, or whether we'll start now, today, with the next person we encounter who doesn't immediately seem important. That choice takes 5 seconds. What it changes can last generations.